Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Once more, still getting over being sick here, so apologies, my voice sounds a little bit off today. Still, we're getting there, I promise, slowly but surely. Now, focusing on Warzone 2 here, I won't lie, I'm a bit surprised that up until this point, we really haven't seen any significant weapon tuning or weapon changes in the game. I mean, the overall Warzone 2 meta really, for the most part, is the exact same right now as it was back on day one on November 16th when the game first launched, right? Like, we really just have not seen all that many changes. But we know for a fact that is going to change here soon. Almost guaranteed to be changing with the Season 2 update. Every single major seasonal update and, Reloaded update has some weapon changes included in it. Season 1 Reloaded, bit underwhelming in that regard, obviously, but with Season 2, we can almost certainly expect to see a major meta shift, if not even before then. Obviously, we're sort of in this down period, this dead period for COD right now, where we don't have any content coming or anything like that. So it is very possible that on any given day, they just release a random update. It could be a downloadable one. It could be just a hotfix update that includes a bunch of different weapon changes. And of course, if that happens, we'll be covering it here on the channel. But that said, today I wanted to break down a slight preview as to what to expect when it comes to this next meta update. What weapons are most likely going to be targeted? Mainly, I want to focus in this video on the nerfs, because buffs are a lot more unpredictable, because that really just depends on what weapons the devs feel they want to, push a little bit more. So that's more so on them, but the nerfs are pretty obvious, and especially with a few weapons here in Warzone 2, like, you could almost guarantee that we are going to see certain weapons see some pretty significant nerfs based on a handful of things. You might be wondering, Zach, how are you talking about weapon tuning that's not here yet? Well, the devs, like I said, are somewhat predictable in what they change based on certain criteria. So one of the main things you want to factor in when it comes to weapon changes is overall usage, a weapon's popularity. Is it being used by a ton of different players, and are the players that are using that all doing well with it? Because typically, the more a weapon gets used, the more average its KD becomes, because some of those more casual players catch on to that weapon being really good, and that in then turn drops like the overall KD, right? Whereas if a weapon is really, really powerful but really hard to use, it'll probably be really good in the hands of those top tier players, but a casual may not find a ton of success with it. So if a weapon is popular and that weapon is dominating, chances are it's probably going to see that nerf. And that's just one of the many factors that goes into weapon changes. Of course, the devs have way more data than us, so we don't have nearly as much to work off of as them, which, I mean, for good reason, right? But the closest thing that we do have to that is warzonerank.com. I'm not sure if this is just their site API or if they did finally get access to the Call of Duty API, but currently they do have their sort of popularity list, if you will, their best guns in Warzone 2 based off of, where they'd rank them, but also their general popularity. And this is a small glimpse of some of the weapons that I wanted to touch on for sure. You can see weapons like the RPK and the Fennec are dominating in terms of popularity. The Kastov is up there as well. We got a select few guns here in Warzone 2 that I do want to focus on because, I mean, they are just as good as it gets. So obviously, I mean, weapon number one, the RPK. This is by far the number one weapon I'd be choosing to get nerfed here, just because it is the most used based off of what I see in gameplay, what you guys see over on Twitter, in loadout videos, whatever the case may be. The RPK is far and away the number one most used gun because it is easy to use, it's got good stats, it's just dominating Warzone right now, like 100%. It is standing in the way of a much healthier meta, so I'm fully expecting the RPK to see a decently significant nerf, whether that is to its damage range, whether that's to its control. We're gonna have to wait and see on the specifics there, but the RPK I fully expect to get knocked down a little bit because right now it is just way too good. And going hand in hand with that, what are you always running as a secondary on an RPK loadout? Of course, it is the Fennec. For the most part, the entire SMG category is super competitive. Like, if you were to compare the stats of the SMGs, their TTKs, their overall stats, a lot of them are like neck and neck. They are right there with each other. It is a very competitive category overall, with the exception of the Fennec, which is just better than everything right now. So, I mean, close range, it dominates. It does have that terrible damage per mag, which is really the only thing keeping the Fennec from being just wildly unstoppable. But even so, it is the best TTK basically at any range for an SMG. It is just so ridiculously good up close, and that's another one that I definitely expect to get knocked down a tier just because it is not allowing for the healthiest possible meta. By the way, as we are going through everything today, just a reminder, if you are new to the channel, every single day, I got you covered with all things going on between MW2, Warzone 2, and DMZ. So if you want to guarantee you're always up to date, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Join us ultimately on the road to 1 million subscribers. And if you guys enjoy this video, let me know by dropping a like on it as well. Let's try and go for 2,000 likes on this one. Now, the next obvious change I think is coming with the next meta update here is another change to the Akimbo pistols, another nerf to the Akimbo pistols, primarily the X13, which the Akimbo X13 has not been nerfed yet, and then probably another nerf to the Akimbo P890s, because these two in particular are just so good up close. Now, yes, they are Akimbo, so you're super limited in range. You're obviously only able to hip fire with them, but if you're in a building engagement, if you are close range against these things, they are not super friendly when it comes to a competitive gunfight, just because they dominate that 0 to 10 meter range where you are super up close. Even after the nerf to the P890s, those are still a problem, and the X13 Akimbo is also very strong. So both of those I could be seeing some significant changes to as well. Now, the remainder of these weapon changes I don't think are as obvious as those previous ones. I think those are definitely the ones that are going to see the big changes. There are a few other guns though that I feel like are pretty strong right now in the right hands that are probably trending upwards in the grand scheme of things. And if they don't also see changes, and then we see changes to things like the RPK and whatnot, they would just jump right into that spot and fill that gap right away, and we'd be back to a somewhat unhealthy meta. So I do feel like the RAAL is one that it could potentially be on the chopping block, just specifically for long range, because its long range TTK is so much better than everything else in the game. It's also relatively low recoil. Like, I think there is a place for it for sure. You just have to manage that long range damage versus that control at some point. So, maybe adjusting those a little bit, and it would be a lot more balanced and still really competitive in my opinion. But overall, that thing's damage is absolutely absurd compared to basically everything else. So I could see the RAAL seeing some slight changes. And then also the Kastov 7.62. Just like with the Fennec, the rifle category is very competitive in general, especially like in the mid to long range. But then there's the Kastov 7.62, which again is just so much better in terms of TTK than all the other rifles. So just limiting that a little bit, bringing that back more in line with the other rifles would then create a very competitive scenario where you could pick and choose between almost any rifle and be able to find success with it depending on your skill level. So just a handful of weapons there that I feel like could end up seeing some slight changes, some more than others in the form of the RPK and the Fennec, I would say. But then also one last thing that I'm super curious about, and we've talked about this a handful of times already, the snipers. We know for a fact sniping in Warzone 2 is an awkward meta because you can't one-shot. And this is fully something that I expect the devs to experiment around with and see if there is a place in the meta for snipers that can one-shot, maybe at a certain distance. Of course, back in Warzone 1, we had things where like snipers could one-shot within 75 meters or whatever the case is for iron trials or whatever. Doing something similar to that here in Warzone 2, I feel like could prove to be pretty interesting to sort of test things out and actually just see if it works. Obviously, you could always change the values back if it became wildly broken or super overpowered or something like that, but I definitely feel like there's not much of a place for the sniper meta right now, where there certainly could be with a few tweaks and a few adjustments here and there. All that being said though, those are the main things that I'm expecting for this next meta update. Whenever it does end up happening, I'm gonna have you guys covered here on the channel with all the patch notes right as they drop. So stick it here for that and everything else going on in COD. News, updates, class setups, tips, I got you covered with all that every single day. And also, if you guys enjoyed the video, let me know by dropping a like on it as well. And as always, if you want to check out any of my partners, be sure to use code IMMORTAL for a discount on all Scuff, G Fuel, Gamer Advantage, and Control Freak products. And the links for all those can be found down in the description below. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.